Okay, we are live. So we're recording this meeting, but it's internal recording. I haven't made any public announcements for now. We will have a discussion about the project status, and then we will do some demos and code dives. So we have two topics for code dives in the agenda. One is for macro support, and another one for project naming strategies. And actually, I asked to do some notes, so I will be mostly speaking today. Yeah, it would be nice if you do some notes in the meeting notes document. So yeah, we have something in the written form. And yeah, actually, I realized that I haven't pushed the meeting notes for the previous meeting, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's my fault. Did we have another document, by the way? So yeah, I'll just share my screen so that you see what I'm doing. Okay, this is my screen.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually, yeah, this is the document we had. So yeah, I forgot to put meeting notes for the last meeting. I've written them somewhere on my computer, but I didn't put them to this document. So just to quickly summarize what we had there.
It was May 17th.
So yeah, we agreed to proceed with GMH evaluation. And to limit the performance testing for now, because we already get a lot of results from Vue.dev. The manual performance testing for now, yeah. Okay, something like that. Yeah, I'll put full meeting notes once I find where I put them, because I definitely entered them to whatever Google Doc. I just realized that not to this one, which is odd. Okay, today we have code dive. So yeah, actually we will focus on that. So what I'm going to show today is macro support. And another one is project naming strategy. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so I guess that IntelliJ IDEA won't work properly for me today. Okay. Yeah, we can just use Visual Studio Code for today. I do not think that there will be something complicated. So yeah, let's take a look at the plugin code. So the plugin code we have, unfortunately, the plugin is quite a mess in terms of packaging, because yeah, there were packaging requirements of my previous company. Then Michelin, its previous maintainers, they also had their own package, and finally we have a community package now. So yeah, it's quite a mess. But yeah, there is a kind of macro engine in role strategy plugin. So the purpose of this macro engine is actually to save time on configuration and to improve performance. So if we take a look at demo Jenkins configuration as code. This is the demo I was presenting during one of the previous meetings. So here you may see that there is Jenkins YAML file. And in this Jenkins YAML file, I have role strategy configuration. So it's here. And you may see that it's pretty short in role strategy terms, because I use names like that. A toner node seed with some pattern, with some permissions. So what is the idea of that? On my instance, I have had hundreds of users, and it was really difficult to manage all of the permissions because they restrict requirements. So finally, we made a decision that instead of managing permissions on our own, we introduce a new engine called ownership-based security. So actually implemented in the ownership plugin. So ownership plugin is a plugin which allows setting owners for particular jobs. But what I do there, I use macros in order to use a role strategy. So here you may see that there are two checks. One that the user is an owner, another one is that it's primary owner. And there is a number of permissions the user gets if it belongs to this role. But instead of just having a number of patterns, I have one global role. So firstly, it significantly improves the performance of role strategy plugin, because I generally don't have to check regular expressions. I delegate all the decisions to these macros. And these macros actually implement integration with ownership-based plugin. So once somebody sets an owner for a particular job or for a particular folder, something like that, then permissions get applied, because the macro checks whether the item on the check, for example, job belongs to a particular owner. So this was an idea of logic I wanted to implement. One of the goals was to simplify administration of the instance, because I wouldn't have to manage permissions on my own. Another goal was to improve performance of role strategy, because again, avoiding regular expressions where possible. So in order to implement that, I needed some integration with role strategy plugin, and this integration has been implemented as a macros. So the thing here is actually a macros, and there is a number of macros in the Jenkins instance. So probably I'll just try to run the demo. I suppose it should be possible. Okay, I'm just starting my old configuration as code demo. Full disclaimer, I have no idea what is the version of that, but it should be good enough. Okay. Yeah, well, I hope it's still good enough. So if you have any questions during the presentation, just ask them. Okay, yeah, so this is actually the instance I was presenting at one of the previous meetings, demo Jenkins config as code. So I'll just put the link to the meeting notes, I believe. Okay. So let's see what's going on. So the instance has started up. So now we can go to the web interface. Okay, so we have our instance running. Okay. So yeah, basically it's an instance we have configured with some owners, etc. What I wanted to show you here, that if we go to manage a Jenkins page, this instance is really old. So here we have not manage plugin, manage and assign roles, and here we have an endpoint for role strategy macros. So this is a list of macros which actually supported by a role strategy plugin. You may see that there is a number of macros, but yeah, actually not all of them are being used, and you may see that some macros are really deprecated. So there are only few macros which are available, and most of these macros actually come from the ownership plugin. So all other, yeah, there is a macros like buildable job, but yeah, it's something as a reference implementation. So what you can see that macros actually can be assigned on the global level, on the project level, on the slave level, agent level, and some macros are applicable only for a particular configuration. For example, item-specific project security, it's another engine we will probably talk about later. It's configurable only for jobs. Okay, so yeah, this is a macro, and if you go to the web UI, so what do we have in this instance now? So in this instance, we just have the configuration I have presented before, so two macros. What does happen in the code? So if you go to the code, yeah, you may see that there is a macro extension point. Well, it's not an extension point, I guess. Okay, yeah, we will get to extension points later. So yeah, macro is just a basic abstract class which implements what is the logic. So you may see that there is always a prefix, there is some parameterization here. So macros can be parameterized. Here I do not use parameterization because yeah, macros are pretty simple, but if needed, I can add parameters to these macros. And what happens? So the class is pretty long, but yeah, actually what is the entire logic we have, except parsing, etc. We have one method which is checking the macro. So yeah, we can find how it's implemented. So yeah, let's take a look at the buildable job macro, this reference implementation in this plugin. So you may see that the macro, yeah, it comes from role macro extension. So role macro extension is a extension point. The class was designed a bit before I knew Jenkins architecture well. I mean, in terms of plugin extensions. So the code may look quite uncommon. So here what we have, there is a role macro extension. It's an extension point, and its objective to actually produce macro objects. So the main purpose of this extension point is to just provide a list of extensions which are available, and this is exactly what it is doing. So for example, for buildable job, there is a macro, and this macro actually checks whether the type is a project, because yeah, obviously it makes no sense to apply this macro for jobs. And here is a call which has permission. So yeah, this is a call which finally invokes permission check. So you may see that it accepts seed, it accepts permission, it accepts role type, and also item you want to check, and the reference to the macro. So all parameters, etc., are passed here. So this is the final permission check logic. The problem is how do we route this logic, because yeah, it might be quite time consuming. Effectively, macros are being checked in code invocations. So here, yeah, there is a static method called isMacro, which accepts role, and effectively you should be indexing code now. Yeah. So here's role walker class. It's in a role map. So it's our basic permission checking code. And here you may see that we actually check whether particular role is a macro, and if it's a macro, instead of applying common logic, we actually apply the macro extension is applicable call, so that we verify that well, actually we have a permission for that. So yeah, this is the code where macro is being applied. So effectively, it's when we go through the list of roles and check roles which apply to a particular seed. And what happens here if one role is actually matched, then we abort the cycle. So matching one macro is enough to actually be able to return a list of matching roles and to provision a seed object so that other instances can use it for permission checks. Okay, do you still follow me?
Yeah. So basically, there is no comparison for regular expressions here.
Yeah, there is no comparison. Obviously, the performance of this approach wouldn't be quite good, but yeah, macro extensions have caching. So, for example, get macro by current name. So, parsing logic. So, basically, each time we go through roadmap, you may want to retrieve macro instance from a role definition, and we do it in runtime right now because we don't know when permission checks. So is macro logic just checks whether we start from the macro prefix. So yeah, it's pretty easy to check whether it's a macro. They think that performance may be still bad. So here in get macro logic, we actually implement some caching. So get macro parse. Yeah, so here, yeah, there should be caching here, by the way. Unless I mess up something, it should be in this class. Yeah, let's take a look. Okay, so yeah, let's see whether I'm missing something. So yeah, parsing for macros, yeah, basically we extract parameters. If they exist, we assign parameters to the parameters list. And finally, we produce a list of new macro, which has macro name, macro ID, and parameters. So macro ID is a way to actually distinguish similar macros because yeah, if we have this interface, for example, we want to have this macro applied 2 times for different patterns. And in such case, we need ID in order to distinguish these macros in this list. So it was a kind of hack integrated, which actually allows setting a unique parameter. And then, yeah, of course, all other parameters are being applied. So yeah, this is how the macro object is being created. But yeah, I believe there should be caching somewhere because it's pretty heavy. Yeah. So there is a method called get macro. So let's go there. Oh, okay. It pretty much answers my question. So there is no macro cache right now. So each time we actually parse macros in the case of this logic, so we have a cache only for the names. So yeah, probably it could be one of the ways to improve the performance of macro logic if we apply that, because yeah, right now we parse macro each time, and we could have just had a cache, for example, for well, generally it's a string to object cache, because once we have a unique string, the macro result never changes. So yeah, it's one of the object items where we could improve the performance. So what else do we have for macros? Actually, well, that's pretty much it. So the macro is a pretty straightforward implementation because again, I mostly needed it to glue role strategy code with ownership plugin so that I was able to implement custom strategies in ownership. This macro extension structure is not perfect in terms of common extension things, but yeah, still you get extension point. So you can write more macros if needed. And yeah, probably we could fix this performance issue so that it would have been better. But yeah, I believe this code still can be improved a lot. Mm-hmm. Okay, any questions? Yeah, so if you want to try out the performance, probably doing something like ownership-based security. So yeah, you already have some setting with which initializes multiple roles and multiple users and multiple jobs. So probably you could just try out the security. So yeah, you could take the security. Once we have some benchmarks, we can just run checks for owners, for co-owners, and it may help. One of additional macros it makes sense to review as a part of this meeting. There is a macro called item-specific ownership. Again, it's in ownership plugin, but actually this macro is again not well. It's an implementation for role strategy plugin, but it's pretty much universal. So, for example, let's create a new project. And here you may see that okay, so yeah, we have a project foo, and if you go back to where should it be? All right, I'm going to run destination. So here, if I click manage ownership, there is a way to configure specific access rights. And if I go here, yeah, so you may see that actually there is a way to specify users and groups for particular jobs. So it was created the kind of glue code in order to integrate role strategy with common matrix-based authorization strategy. So with ownership plugin, you can specify permissions not only for common users, sorry, not only for owners and secondary owners, but also for common users. And yeah, it passes through item-specific security. So when you have item-specific security macro enabled, actually you can do perform permission checks here as well. This code is probably not ideal, and maybe it might make sense to move this code to role strategy plugin. But yeah, I wasn't totally sure about that because yeah, it looks like a hack which is not supposed to be in a role strategy plugin. So that's why I implemented it in ownership plugin when I needed it. Okay. So, any questions?
You had talked about passing parameters to the macros.
Okay.
Could you show an example of that?
Yeah, I could show an example. So basically, it was a kind of over-engineering, I believe, because yeah, although there are ways to have parameters, there was no real need to have them in my cases in the final implementation. So here, if we go to manage roles, so here there is co-owner no seed. So what we could do, we could just create a new role, something like, let's take a look what's the syntax, because here I really didn't use it for a while. Okay, so here, yeah, role strategy macros. So yeah, here are some examples. So for example, we can take, well, so it would look like something like that. So we can add second ID because we already have the first instance. And here we could have parameter foo, which, yeah, just first parameter, which would be, for example, something like display or whatever.
Your sound is not clear anymore.
Okay, so it's how we define them. How do we use them? So the idea was that you might have macros which actually take parameters. So here, for example, let's take a look whether we have any macro with a real parameter. Macro, so yeah, there are get parameters. So let's see whether this method is actually used anywhere. Only in tests. So yeah, the idea was that you might have parameterizable macros. So for example, we have a macro something like so is job type pipeline. So something like that. So if you want to have a macro which actually checks whether a particular job, so if you want to apply permissions only to pipeline projects, we could do something like that using the macro engine if we have a macro like is job type. So yeah, it's probably a viable example of how do we do parameterization of macros. But again, there is no code which actually does it right now. Okay, does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I believe that for now you shouldn't bother much about this particular use case. But again, from the performance standpoint, the problem is with having caching, because yeah, once you have caching on the retrieval logic, then yeah, everything else it won't matter much, because yeah, the role retrieval will be fast enough. Well, basically, it's pretty much fast even now. So that's the reason why I didn't implement cache here. But yeah, implementing cache might be reasonable if we really work on performance.
Okay.
Okay. Well, it's actually a trivial patch. I'm not sure why I have never done that. And yeah, this method is actually thread safe now because it's concurrent cache. So yeah, I'll probably clean up this code a bit. Okay, the second question in the list was about project naming strategy. So yeah, there is a class called role-based project naming strategy, which has been implemented by Konstantin, GitHub ID Kostasha. So what this does actually, the idea that you can restrict project naming using role strategy. So just to provide you a sample of configuration. So here we have, well, we have a bunch of configurations here, but what we don't do have, we don't have really permission checks. So for example, as a user, if I have a permission like say, user can create jobs, okay, so something like that. So let's say that a user has access to folder foo, and yeah, we implement this role, and we say that the user can create and configure jobs within folder foo. So with configure, there is no problem at all. Configure will work out of the box. So yeah, we can probably just demo it. So the role. So yeah, the role was created. Assign roles. Yeah, it's here. I just called it user. So yeah, add user to the list. And yeah, we create a folder for. I created the job. Okay. So yeah, I'm deleting the project again, and now I create it as a folder. Okay. And inside the folder, we create a job called, for example, test job. Okay, so here's our permission matrix. So if I log out as admin and log in as user, you may see that in the job foo, in the job pool, there is test job, which I actually can configure because my permission permits that. Though I cannot really run the build of the job, which pretty much makes no sense. But yeah, I can only configure the job. The problem that I cannot create jobs here even if I have create permission, just because in Jenkins permissions to create jobs are global right now. So as one of the solutions there, we have this role-based strategy. So what we could do, we can go to manage Jenkins, and in manage Jenkins, we can define a project naming strategy. Okay. Yeah, restrict project naming. So in restrict project naming, we have multiple options, and one of the name is actually role-based strategy. So role-based strategy just says how we restrict permissions of the job. So we consult with role-based strategy in order to do implementation. It's pretty much what we have here in the code. Sorry, yeah, role-based naming strategy. So it's an extension point implementation. This extension point comes from the Jenkins core. So we just implement core logic, and here we say where the purpose of this extension point is to check whether a user can create a job. So when we try to create a job in this web interface, for example, new item, freestyle project, something like that. So you may see that here is no warning right now, but let's try to implement proper permissions for our users. Manage Jenkins, manage and assign roles. So what we will do here, that we will permit everybody to actually create jobs, but we will still have this permission here. So why do we need that? Because yeah, in Jenkins, permission to create jobs is global or configurable on the view level, but yeah, view level is not accessible for roles from role strategy plugin right now. So yeah, we enabled our permission, and yeah, let's log out and log in as user. So here you can see that there is actually we have a new item button, but for example, let's try to create a job test job. So if everything is configured properly, it won't be able to do that. Yep. So you get access denied with odd exception, but yeah, basically you cannot create a job. But if we do the same in folder foo, I believe that it should work. I have never tested it, at least for a while, but yeah, here we can create a job. So this is how this permission works, role-based project naming strategy. So one thing to know about that this logic actually doesn't work in real time. So it gets applied only when a user tries to create a job from web UI or from CLI. So it means that performance is probably not the biggest concern for this logic. But yeah, it might still make sense to keep this logic in mind if you consider the configuration as code and massive job creation on an instance startup. Because yeah, on instance startup, this check name will be also invoked by Jenkins core. Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions? Okay. So, does it give you enough information, Abida, for the implementation?
Yeah, it does.
Yes, Pun Ronje, any questions from you? Okay, then probably, yeah. Okay, we have some time on this call, so probably we could take a look at the plugins, the plugin itself. So yeah, there is a pull request from Abide about integrating GMH, and yeah, thanks a lot for doing that. Because yeah, the code is pretty much ready to go. I mean, in terms of the logic. So one thing which is missing, in my opinion, is that well, we actually need to have some plugin-specific tests. So maybe it would make sense to replace this tab by something closer to what we would like to see. So one of the stories here that probably we could somehow break down the code so that the initialization goes to the test class here. So for example, here you integrate, create a user realm. So maybe it makes sense to actually have this code somewhere in sample benchmark so that we split the framework part and the part which is specific to role strategy plugin. And after that, it makes sense to just have a couple of tests for role strategy. So you could copy existing tests from JUnit side and just split the code to initialization and performance checks. And yeah, after that, the code should work perfectly as a benchmark. So for example,
I don't need to check the exact configuration that I was using earlier as a test case for the benchmark. No,
I think you don't. So it makes sense to just take some existing tests, which are pretty simple. So for example, a role test. So yeah, these tests are JUnit ones. So, oh, no, I didn't want to do that. I'm not even sure it will run. Okay, so here, for example, there are some tests which use Jenkins rule. So these tests are actually based on runtime. So I believe that you can actually use something like that. So for example, here we just impersonate as user Alice. So we use local data in order to configure the instance, but instead of that, you can do it inside the code. And yeah, there is some logic which you can actually just somehow run in your performance test. So you can authenticate as a user externally and then run benchmark only if who has permission, for example.
okay.
Yeah, and actually it's a good test for the framework because yeah, for this set authentication thing, yeah, it makes sense to have it external from the test. Otherwise, you will be testing session initialization instead of permission checks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe just taking this test and creating such a sample performance test is something we could do. Yeah, here I use local data again. So, but yeah, instead of local data, you can just use configuration as code, for example, or you can use Java code. So yeah,
Okay.
something we could do.
For running configuration as code, we would need the plugin installed, right?
Right. We would actually need it to be declared as a test dependency. So pretty much like you did for performance testing things. So yeah, for example, here's a test dependency, and you do the same for plugin, and hence it will be installed for test scope, but it won't be mandatory to use it in production.
Okay.
Yeah, and regarding JCask, well, probably it's too early to consider that right now because yeah, there is a pending pull request for configuration as code. So even without it, you can actually use configuration as code using a plugin. So just to show you an example in GitHub, Jenkins configuration as code plugin. So yeah, there is configuration as code support plugin, which currently includes support for role strategy, I believe. And yeah, here's a role strategy. And here should be tests as well, I believe. Why tests here? I believe, I suspect they're here. ESRC test, integration, plugins, Cask. Yeah, role strategy test. Yeah, so here we have some tests. Actually, it just takes YAML. So yeah, there is a notation configured with code, and it sets up all the instance. So that yeah, it's a sample of test, and yeah, for the future of performance testing framework, it might make sense to actually integrate it.
Okay.
Oops. Yeah, I'll just put it there. Maybe you could grant us editing permission to this document so that we can propose updates easily.
I think edit permission is open to everyone.
No, maybe it's not.
You're in suggest mode. You're in suggest mode.
Yeah, I can suggest, but I cannot edit.
I'll just check once again.
Yeah. Yeah, next steps.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just putting notes here. Okay. So what do we need to do for this meeting? So we have something 8 minutes left. Are we missing something?
I sent an email yesterday to the developers mailing list. I hope that's fine.
Yeah, I've seen that. Thanks a lot. I will make sure to reply. But it does the job. Yeah, now I have permissions to accept changes. So for the next meeting, one of the topics we are still missing in our agenda is to have a list of Jira tickets. So maybe at the next meeting we could spend the entire meeting to create Jira tickets for the first coding phase.
Okay.
Anything else we should do at the next meeting? So it's May 24th. Yeah. Mhm. Okay.
I had done some more profiling, this
Mhm.
time with also profiling the string comparison, the matchup methods. So it seems that we would have to spend some time for matching those regular expressions because we cannot basically avoid it for the current configuration.
Mhm. But so
So
yeah, okay.
I was thinking that um, when we assign a role, like when we add a new role or we assign a new user to the role, we perform the calculations at that time, and then we store it somewhere, like it's being stored currently in JSON, and we just read those values and then put out the results instead of computing when we need to do has permission.
Yeah, it makes sense in terms of caching. So yeah, I think that yeah, the devil is in details there because yeah, we will need to do some security audit of the change. But yeah, definitely introducing more caching for permission retrieval for user is something what totally makes sense. And yeah, moreover, we have some obstacles with that because actually the roles, the permission check logic, it doesn't operate with users, it operates with seeds. So any user can have multiple seeds in Jenkins, for example, a group belonging, like authenticated, or groups coming from OLDAP or Active Directory. So maybe it's also something to keep in mind. Mhm. But yeah, I think that if you explore options to have caching on this level, it's something which would be interesting. Mhm. Okay. But yeah, if I recall correctly, our plan is that we firstly do performance testing framework, and then once we have that, we start optimizing performance. Is it
Yeah,
right? Yeah, it
yeah.
doesn't look some discovery right now. I just wanted to check with regards to the plan. So are you fine with this plan, or would you like to invert the schedule a bit?
Whatever you suggest.
Mm. So my preference is usually to have some ways of estimate performance metrics before we start improving them. So yeah, since we already got a good progress with testing framework, maybe we could get it over the line, at least create several baseline tests, and after that we could start tweaking performance, and then we can just press it in parallel. We introduce new feature, we add more tests, and yeah, that's how it should work.
Okay,
Mhm.
that means we'll continue according to the plan.
Yeah, I think the plan was good, so yeah, let's just do it. Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, so if that's it, yeah, I have a meeting in 3 minutes. So yeah, thanks a lot for your time, and yeah, we meet again on Friday, right?
Yeah.
Hmm. So yeah, that's cool. Hmm. So yeah, then we sync up and agree on the next steps. But yeah, we spent most of the time setting up a coding plan for the first phase. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
I'll stop the
Bye.
broadcast. Bye.